we made this.
Engage.
I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise.
Michael Burnham, pleased to meet you.
What we leave behind is not as important as how we've lived.
We will continue exploring, discovering new worlds, new civilizations. That is the United Federation of Planets. That is Starfleet.
Make it so.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Make It So, a Star Trek Universe podcast. My name is Kurt North, and welcome to our final showing or podcast on Star Trek Discovery Season 1. Next week, we have new Star Trek Discovery coming in Season 3, so I'm really looking forward to that. But before we do that, we're going to continue our coverage of Season 1 like we started off a long time ago now. We had a bit of a break in the middle. And joining me is the new co-host, Luke Winch. Luke, how are you doing, mate?
Greetings, mate. I'm all right. Yeah, I'm good. It's been a hell of a week so far, but I'm really, really raring to go with this last episode. It's been nice to kind of hop on board for these last few episodes.
Yeah, and it's nice to remember your name this week as well.
Yeah, that's always good.
'Cause it is always good to remember people's names. Yeah, just saying off air that I've had a tough week myself, tough few weeks, even to the point where it took me a while to even get started to say hello to everyone on this podcast. So we've had to. This is take 4. No, it's not really. Yeah, so I mentioned it just at the top of the hour there. We've got Season 3 coming. Before we jump into this one, what are you looking forward to for next week when this airs? Obviously, 15th, 16th of October. What are you looking forward to? I'm
just looking forward to seeing how this is all going to play out. I mean, the trailer's given hints of this big catastrophe that happened in the past. What's it called? The Burn, I think it's called. So I'm really interested to see what this burn is and how it's changed the face of Starfleet and what's happened. And yeah, and I'm interested to see where all the characters go, of course. Yeah, and we'll see if they stay in the future or if they go back in time again. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we're going to be following along with the other We Made This podcast. We Are Starfleet, so we'll look forward to see how they cover the season. You mentioned the burn there. Have you seen some of the theories about what the burn is? Have you looked into that, or are you going to go in completely blind? Yeah, I'm gonna go in completely blind. I know that there are some like Reddit posts about certain theories, but I haven't really looked into it myself. Yeah, I've only come across the one. It keeps popping up on my Google feed. I was like, will you leave me alone? Especially because I've mentioned on this podcast before about Vok and the fact that I knew that before it happened. So I'm trying my best to stay away. But there is a running theory, which we won't go into now, about it, and it's got links with an old Star Trek show. So that's going to be interesting to see if that pans out, and if it doesn't, what kind of way they're taking it. And I'm looking forward to having it be a bit fresh. I would have liked at the very beginning of this, really, coming back to Season 1, I would have liked to, at the time especially, to have a post-Nemesis show. And obviously we got what we got, and Season 1 as a whole, especially doing this podcast, I've got more of an appreciation for it than I did when I first watched it. That's not to say that I didn't enjoy it the first time around, but yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking for more of a Nemesis thing. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they form it and to see where we are and see what kind of allegories they're going to do as well, whether or not there is going to be some allegorical stuff in there with the modern times. I mean, what's going to be really interesting, and at the time of recording, Joe Biden and Donald Trump had a bit of a spat last night, so it's I don't think they're going to be that on the nose, but it will certainly be interesting. But no, that's not what we're not here to talk about politics. We're here to talk about an episode called Will You Take My Hand? And it first aired on the 11th of February 2018. So that was literally 2 days after my birthday. It's Season 1, Episode 15. and we get the conclusion of season 1 here. We open up with a view of Earth, which quickly shows a view of Kronos, obviously from last episode where we get the plan. What did you make to this opening, Luke?
Yeah, I like it. I like the zoom in from the Klingon ships, kind of zooming into Earth. I noticed there was the construction of Earth spaceport as you zoomed in, and I think that appears in about 4 of the original Crew Star Trek films. That was a nice little touch there. But I like the mirroring of it. So you zoomed into Earth, and then you kind of switched to Kronos and zoomed out to Discovery. That was quite neat there.
Yeah. And what do you make to the episode in general then? Is it an episode you like? Is it something you think is a good closure for the season, or how would you have seen it differently? What are your general thoughts on it?
I think it's a good ending. I think it's a really good wrap up. There's some nice bow ties, kind of tightened up. There's a lot of bookends, either at the beginning of this episode, at the end of the episode, but there's also bookends in regard to the season as a whole. It's very cyclical as well. There's lots of callbacks to the Vulcan Hello, lots of parallels and callbacks to that episode. And what I liked about it wasn't what you may kind of anticipate as a season finale. There's no big space battle. There's no big kind of action-packed finale. It's very much a kind of battle of the wits, really, battle of the intellect, and making a democratic and peaceful solution to the problem, which is in itself a kind of Starfleet value, isn't it? It's, try and solve things with words rather than lasers.
Yeah, I had the same thought, actually. That's something I had down on my note, that you don't get to see, like the final episode of Picard, even though it wasn't quite the same, but you saw the massive Starfleet armada appear, copy and pasted over, thousands of times, which is in itself is a discussion that we might have in the future, maybe in 2021 about that. But yeah, I like it for that reason. I don't know how to think about this episode. I've thought about this over the last couple of weeks, actually, about you mentioned the word bow ties there, and part of me wants me to think some of it I wouldn't have, I maybe have liked to left it a bit looser than that, just because it felt like it was just like if Star Trek Discovery was going to be a one-shot anthology series, like what we heard rumors that it was going to be, that they were going to have an anthology of just before Kirk, and then maybe something either just after Picard or whatever it may have been, then I think I would have liked that a bit more. I think some of the looser ends, and I know you've got likes of Giorgio, which we'll talk about later on. It has been put into the wilderness, and obviously to come back at some point. But there was just elements that I thought it's maybe just a bit too tidy for my taste. I like the ambiguity of stuff, and that for me was maybe just not quite the way I would have done it. But I do agree with you with the cyclical stuff, some of the callbacks to the Vulcan Hello. And especially the way that Michael, the title's called Will You Take My Hand? And Michael is effectively bringing everyone together in various different means. And I do like the Starfleet way and the different way and the ideals that she gets. And, as you say, that the mirroring or the flipping of, for example, the mutiny as well, which we'll talk about. So, yeah, I do think it's an interesting one. And what I quite like with that opening was the way that it kind of does the same as well, because you're looking at Earth and then it flips over to Kronos. So thematically, I think that works quite nicely. I know it's at the end of the episode as well, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on the narrative structure on this, because we open with Michael talking about fear, and we later find out right at the very end of the episode what that was about. It's actually her giving a speech in Paris. Did you like the way that narrative worked, the way they kind of bookended that without telling us at the beginning that it was actually a speech that she was saying rather than just a voiceover or a monologue? And what did you think to the monologue itself? And we can include the stuff at the end as well, just as an opener here.
Yeah, I really liked it. I like it because the whole theme of fear is essentially Starfleet acting in the right way rather than acting in desperation and fear, which is what they initially are doing, because they're basically using Mira Georgiou to destroy Kronos, which is completely wrong. And I mean, it's essentially a terrorist attack, is what they're allowing to happen here. So this conquering fear is very much a huge theme that runs through the entire episode. So I like the way this speech bookends the episode in that way. And the speech is interesting because I actually looked this up for ages because I thought it sounded like something I'd heard before. But it is an original kind of story made by the writers. But for me, it was very. It reminded me of a kind of samurai Bushido type tale of this general telling this young soldier, this young warrior, that the only way to face fear is to basically tell it no. And there's a book called the Hagakure, which is basically these notes that are taking down during 16th and 17th century Japan, and it's these little stories and notes that basically are to guide the samurai warrior through life. It's not just war, but through life and how you present yourself, and live with honor and live with integrity. And it fits in this context as well, that Starfleet and people in Starfleet have to live by a certain code of honor and integrity and compassion. So it works in that context as well for me, and I thought it was really effective.
To be honest, I didn't get the time to look into it in more depth, and I did think, is it something we've heard before? We've had these type of things happen in the show and films. Star Trek, for example, 2009 jumps to mind. You've got like some of the stories at the end of Star Trek 6, and there's loads of like these kind of things. They're standing up in court, or they're standing up in Starfleet, and away you go kind of thing. And I like that. I like that the resonance there is very kind of Star Trek, and the fact of the idea of this fear of changing a person or changing what Starfleet and the Federation are doing here, that Starfleet have made that decision, and Michael sees through it, which we'll get into in a bit more detail. But if we kind of continue on into the kind of the opening scene here with Georgiou, we found out last episode, the shock horror of that Georgiou's been brought onto the ship. With the she was found kind of thing, was presumed dead but isn't, and obviously we know much more than that. And there's a great scene later on with Tilly, which I particularly like. But the reaction of Georgiou and Sarek and Michael was telling, and I thought was quite effective actually. The actual it almost feels counterintuitive, because Michael's trying to trip Georgiou up because I think she's just purely shocked at the fact that Starfleet would go that far. That's the way I see it. It's like, why have you done this kind of thing? Especially with everything that they've done, and it almost feels like a slap in the face to her. But it also builds in this feeling of it's not her Georgiou as well. I think as we get into the towards the end where she accepts that, it's a good way of starting that journey of it's not the Georgiou that Michael has thought. She brought her on with the transporter in the previous episode because she wanted to hold on to what she thought was the essence of her. And obviously this Georgiou version isn't that. But it is a nice scene with both Saru, Michael and Georgiou on the bridge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it kind of the whole thing with Burnham trying to see if this Mira Georgiou has any semblance of humanity and any essence of her original Georgiou is something that kind of goes through a lot of Burnham's kind of character arc in that she has to accept things and move on, and that's kind of part of her character arc throughout the entire season. But yeah, this scene's really good because, like you said, I love the way she tries to rile her up and expose her and trying to trip her up. And it's a great stand-up between these two actresses. and then it kind of moves onto the corridor, doesn't it? And they have this conversation in the corridor.
But what I will say, I mean, they're talking in the corridor, but even before that, I absolutely love this scene. I love the fact that Saru, the way that he says unpalatable, I think is brilliant. I just love that fact that, you know, there's that to and fro between about the Kelpian and the fact that, you know, obviously Saru's knows what it was over there now. And the fact that he's just saying, I'm tough, you know, and that in itself tells you story of where Saru's gone from where he was to where he is now as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I like the fact that he says something here, because in that first instance in the previous episode where she's just off the transporter and this kind of horrible thing that she says to him, he just stays silent, doesn't he? And then he tells Burnham, why didn't you tell me that there were other Kelpians in the mirror universe? So I like the fact that he has this little comeback to her, and it's great. It's a great moment for Saru.
Yeah, it is. I just, as I say, unpalatable. It is tough. It's almost unpalatable. It's like, yeah, no one else knows apart from Michael. Those three knows exactly what the basis of that is, and the fact that they're having that joke that, you know, that's where Michael kind of goes, oh, I've not heard that from where were you from again? I do think it's wonderfully played. So during that talk, I mean, we touched upon it slightly before, and we can touch upon, I think, Starfleet here, is the fact that they're saying that, you know, it mirrors what you were saying about mirrors and cyclical stuff here, because in the corridor, they start talking about the fact that, you know, Michael's asking, why would Starfleet do this? And it's effectively because they are so desperate. And Giorgio says to Michael the fact, like you were desperate when you were in my universe. And I think that's really interesting. Again, a way of setting out where we're going to go with this. But the idea that how far are people willing to go? How far before their moral compass is broken? And Cornwell, which is an interesting one in itself, and as I say, we can talk about Starfleet and Cornwell now, is alluding to this, because Michael's saying that, you know, she's come through the other side of this. She's now at a point where, you know, she's Starfleet through and through now. She's gone through the mire, and Cornwell has been, like we said in the last episode, where we were talking about the fact that she's so, you know, she's Starfleet through and through, and then she completely loses her way in the last episode because she doesn't know where to go. And the breakdown of that informs where we are here and where Starfleet have gone, because Starfleet are literally obliterated at this point, and Cornwell and Starfleet have made this decision and have let their moral compass down, and it's kind of like, you know, they've given up, and this is the only way. The fear has set in, as Michael has said in the speech, and I think that Starfleet itself, to get to that low, that much of a rock bottom low, is really interesting. Yeah.
Starfleet have lost their moral compass, and they've lost their way to sort things out. And yeah, essentially Cornwell and Starfleet essentially want to, you know, to carry out an act of terrorism. But as kind of Burnham says, you know, you've got this Terran to do it because you want to keep your hands clean. You can't face doing it yourselves. You want to distance yourselves from the task at hand. And I find that really interesting. But I mean, it's interesting that they are willing to do this act of terrorism. I mean, in Battlestar Galactica, when they're all under the Cylon occupancy on New Caprica, you know, there's Colonel Ty basically organising suicide bombers to basically disrupt the occupancy. So these good people, these good human beings, they are capable, if they're pushed into a corner, doing things that would never ever normally do.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, that, actually, because it's a human condition about how far can you go before you break, and, you know, everyone, no matter who they are, has a breaking point. And obviously we're talking about an institution here rather than just the sole people, but the people who are involved have got that far. You know, I mean, you look, you know, so many years in the future, the Dominion War, and again, you've got a similar thing with that. I mean, the Dominion War obviously is played out over 3 seasons, and we don't get the Klingon War over that. So, and I think that's one of the negatives on this, is that the Klingon War is very quickly done, you know, and it's kind of like, that's it. Now that's where we lie, and L'Rell will go and do a thing, but that's for later in the day. But I do think that the way that you've got that breakdown of stuff, and I think you're perfectly right to say about the fact that they're using Giorgio, they're using something like not a scapegoat as such, but it's almost like a there's something they can deny, or they can like sort of put it on someone else, and they want to distance themselves from it because they know it's wrong. They know it's wrong. It's just the fact that there's a bit of distance there, and if they can keep that distance, then hopefully that they can feel that they can sleep at night, and that in itself is really interesting. What did it make to the? Obviously, we end up with Laurel and Giorgio and Michael in the room. This is where we're trying to get to the bottom of the mapping out Kronos, and Giorgio does what she needs to do for Laurel, but Laurel is steadfast in her beliefs, and this is something that will come to play. It's almost again kind of like not a mirror image, but we're dealing with three people here who we're going to see later in the episode pretty much together, and it's like flipped here because it's Giorgio's way, not Michael's way. But what did you make to the combination of Giorgio and Laurel? Because Laurel, as I say, is steadfast, and you've got Giorgio trying to do it the way that she knows, and it's a really interesting dynamic between the three of them. Yeah,
it's really interesting because in any past interrogation, I think Laurel's spoken with Cornwell in one instance, and also spoken to Burnham, and with those two, she's been that ever so more conversational and a bit more open. And I think seeing Giorgio kind of it makes her kind of much more standoffish, because she's like, how are you here? You pierced our Lord's heart, and you should be dead, and you're not. And I think that puts her into kind of aggressive, combative mode, and she's absolutely adamant that she will not give anything away. So Giorgio's brutalization of Laurel is completely ineffective in that, and she thinks that she can get any information out of her by torturing her and beating the crap out of her. But in the end, even though she gets the 10 bells knocked out of her, she doesn't say a word, and it ends up being Burnham's way that works. And that's interesting in itself, because you can kind of ask the question, was Burnham avoiding going to Tyler in the first place? Because where we left him in the last episode, there was a certain finality to it, wasn't there? That they may not have anything to do with each other anymore. But I think the fact that she has no choice in the matter, she then turns to Tyler, and I love that bit where she just shouts, "Enough!" It's such a great moment. And
I do like Laurel saying, that you've already lost, because words like that, it's like Doctor Who when the Doctor says to the Prime Minister, "Doesn't she look tired?" It's just those lines that really hit home, and I love that line in Doctor Who. I think it's one of the best lines they've done. Just the fact, I can destroy a Prime Minister with 5 words. Doesn't she look tired? Which I think is amazing. And I think that you've already lost is not quite as nuanced as that, but it's still basically saying, I've won. You're not going to get anything from me. I have pure desire for reunification, which is really interesting in that, because that's the way that we get around this at the end. Is the fact that Laurel has this she has this ultimate belief. She's not going to shift from this belief that it's got to be the 24 houses pulled together to be the Klingon Empire, and she's not going to budge from that. And I think that Michael needs to see that right now in this moment, because it informs her decision, both, as you say, which we'll talk about Ash in a second, but with Laurel having seen just how thing that is, that forms part of the solution in the end. Yeah, definitely. I like seeing the genesis of Burnham's plan, whether she kind of plans ahead or thinks on her feet later on when they bring Laurel in. But yeah, it's a great kind of opening for her to have that kind of card to play. With that decision for Ash to go to Ash, Michael makes it begrudgingly. There's another way. We have to go and see Ash. And again, without going too much into, and we'll use this as it comes up through the episode chronologically, but I'm quite happy to talk about them as they appear. So Ash here, he is obviously tying his bowline, and you mentioned about the tying of knots and things, and actually it's interesting how that's used in this part here and at the end. But Giorgio keeps calling him it, and Tyler himself has a crisis of who he is, what he is. And it's interesting that it's much about his identity more than anything else. So the fact, again, that the writers are using it here, that Giorgio is saying, what is it? It has access to memories. It does this. It does that. The fact that Ash can't live in either world. And as we get to the end of the episode, we find that, he's accepted that himself, but he's found a way of actually, making it good for both sides. And finding his way that way is a really good writing, because I do like the fact that he's being given a title of it at the beginning, and this identity crisis that he's having, and it probably makes him at that point feel how am I going to get around this? I can't choose a side. I've got to do something different. And again feeds back what Michael does. He has to find another route. It's not just the obvious two choices.
Yeah, what I really like about this scene is that. As you said, this conversation here and how Giorgio treats him and how it kind of feeds into his thoughts. This of course informs his decision to go with Laurel later on. But what it also does, it also informs the true meaning of Torchbearer and how that's used as an overall theme later on in the speech. And I like the use of the cord because, again, we've got this visual representation of a tether, this kind of theme that's run through the last 3 or 4 episodes between him and Burnham. And I think this tether thing is also a kind of link between the two identities, and somehow in the middle he's got to find his identity as a compromise of the two.
Yeah, and the fact that it says that the knot itself it chooses, the bowline, it runs, but it doesn't slip. So the fact that it is a knot that can move up and down, it can move along the rope as such, and it can actually find its own position in itself is a nice little touch. And the fact that it comes back to something that was in his past, in Ash's past. But then he's actually talking about stuff in the Klingons in Vox past, because the two are being weighed up at that point. It's a balancing act, and I like that. When we do get to Kronos, though, there's a few little scenes in there with sparring in and stuff like that, and we get to the Kronos. What did you think to the Orion Syndicate embassy?
I was kind of thinking to myself, is it plausible that Klingons would allow an outpost of another species on their planet? And in a way, I think it does work because, the Orions are known to be slave traders and pirates. So it kind of makes sense that these two species would kind of be compatible. And if they're slave traders or traders of any kind, it's a good way of Klingons to, get supplies or weapons or manpower or anything like that. So it works. I think it works for me in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. It's something that caught me originally off guard. It was a bit left field. It was like, oh, all right, okay. And the fact that we've got people from Orion on there, there's very few humans on there. There's obviously Klingons. It looks like there's destitute Klingons, and that's something that I wanted to bring up as well. Is that Klingons in the olden days, you would have they're very much an allegory of whatever they may well be for the enemy as such. But it's something that they kind of develop more with Star Trek Picard. Obviously, let's bring it back to make it so. With the Romulans, the fact that the Romulans have a North, for example, that's another Doctor Who reference. But you've also got like the fact that there's different ridges with the Romulans. Then there might well be this hierarchy within the Romulan Senate and things like that. You've got the Tel Shiar and various different aspects of Romulan culture. And it's something that I'd like to see address more as we get into more of the newer shows. The fact that, it's not just, the Klingon Empire. It's not just the 24 houses. you do have this dystopian, almost Blade Runner style feel to like a rundown old temple area, which they don't use anymore, and it's been reconstituted as an Orion like outpost, degraded, demigrated, you know, and very, as I say, very Blade Runner in its way. It's all, you know, with the kind of the marquees and stuff like that, and the street food. I did actually quite like the aesthetic of it as well.
Did you ever watch a show called Babylon 5?
This is a sore point. Babylon 5, I just couldn't get past the graphics. I couldn't physically get past the graphics. And everyone tells me about the story. The story is fantastic. And I understand that, but I can't do it. It's like Star Trek Insurrection. I can't get past that either. Now, because it's Star Trek and it's my beloved show, it's as soon as they start going like too far, and that's why I like Battlestar Galactica so much, actually, because it's grounded. It's more grounded than anything else. So the fact that it just tries to push that envelope too far for me, and Babylon 5 especially just didn't attract me whatsoever to that. But go ahead with your point.
But it's actually one of my favourite science fiction series of all time. I think it's absolutely superb. But
I apologise.
That's okay. I know a lot of people can't get on with it, so that's I'm fine with that. I'm happy with that. But basically on the station, Babylon station it's basically a UN in space, but they have a social hierarchy within the station. So there's lots of people who come to Babylon 5 to try and find their dream job and you know and find their riches, but they end up being basically homeless and on the streets. And there's a place they call Down Below, which is basically where all the homeless people kind of go. There's a lot of crime down there. It's people who have been outcast from their species. So this kind of Orion outpost reminded me a lot of this kind of lower social hierarchy that we're witnessing.
Yeah, and I suppose that echoes exactly what I was saying in Blade Runner as well. It's the same sort of thing, isn't it? It's that, you know, everyone in Blade Runner who lives in the towers are well-to-do, well-off, and everyone that's on the ground in the gutter are like sort of your dystopian kind of like trying to survive, fight to survive kind of thing. So it's interesting how science fiction does that a lot, you know, as I say, the up above and down below kind of aspect. So that's really interesting. Giorgio wants Tilly. It's something that we're going to touch upon. The fact that, you know, she actually physically wants Tilly. What did he make to that? Because there's an element here of is Giorgio wanting Tilly because she's killy, or is it Giorgio wanting Tilly because she feels she may be susceptible to be not corrupted as such, but to be manipulated into what eventually, as we say with the drone. I mean, Tilly actually ends up being a lot more cleverer than that, and obviously picks up on it. Because of the whole thing with the Orion, is that something that's been planned, or is it just happenstance that she ends up there and with Giorgio at that point, or do you think it's more of a manipulation?
I was thinking the same thing. I couldn't decide which one it was. I couldn't decide whether she chose her because maybe she had a sense of familiarity with Tilly because they'd kind of worked together in the mirror universe. Or was it, as you said, to choose Tilly because maybe she's not exactly that kind of assertive or reliable and is easy manipulative, and, you know, they get that maybe the Orion creepy guy played by Clint Howard, maybe he was a plant. But I honestly couldn't decide which one it was, and it's never really made clear anyway in the episode either way. So yeah. I wasn't really 100% sure why Tilly was chosen, but there were lots of kind of theories that fit with the episode.
Yeah, and as you say, with the because you don't know how much history or crew manifest that Giorgio's being given. Does she see that Tilly is a cadet at this point and hasn't got a pips yet? You know, and does she think it's an easy manipulation thing? And I like the ambiguity of it. I actually do like the fact that you're not really sure, and you don't necessarily, it could be something that you just watch and not really think about, and it just happens. But obviously we find out that Tilly's obviously a bit more cohesive than that, even though she gets very high. But those are the two moments, as I say, in Tilly's episode, with her realizing it isn't Giorgio, and the fact that she says, I'm very high.
And also from a plot point of view, she is there as a support unit for Burnham, who is obviously having a very tough time being on an away mission with Georgiou, and it's kind of lots of memories are flooding back. So, you know, she's there as a kind of supportive friend as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that then, because we get there's a conversation with Ash and Michael as well. Michael's going to a home planet where she, will obviously open old wounds. You know, it's kind of like I was thinking about this the other day, and I wanted to like not research it, but just go back into it. And you've watched it recently. We're going through loads of like popular culture TV shows here now. Luke is Lost in Sawyer's Story.
Oh yeah,
you know, it's like when so it has that feeling to me. The fact that you know he was when he was under the bed, and the fact that you know you've got this story of Michael like going to the home planet where she can see this is the planet, this is the culture, and these are the people, even though she's been, you know, fighting them right through the whole season, that killed her parents. And the fact that they sat at the table and ate and things like that was kind of like, you know, the horror of that. And she's able to, you know, to find, you know, the whole, and again, the whole point of having this dystopian Orion Syndicate like embassy here is that you've got, you know, the juxtaposition of there's people here, there's Klingons who are destitute, there's, you know, the people who are just not living well. How can you like encourage genocide? I know she doesn't, obviously she realizes this later, but the fact that how could we get to this point, even with the plans that she thought it was going to be, the fact that, you know, many innocent lives are going to be taken here. And, you know, it's just for the very kind of nature of her anger towards the Klingons that did actually destroy her life. Yeah,
I mean, quite a lot happens emotionally for Burnham in these kind of scenes, particularly when Tyler starts speaking Klingon and laughing with them, and she does that great moment with Soneqa's face where she's flinching when she hears a language, and that kind of has a twofold meaning, doesn't it? Because of course she's being reminded of her parents' murder, but I think she's also flinching because she doesn't like that Klingon voice coming out of Tyler. It's another reminder that he has a Klingon in him. He's half Klingon. So I really like the way that scene played out.
Yeah, it's almost like in some ways, especially as we get towards the end when Michael has the conversation with Tyler about the eyes, you know, because earlier in the other episode where she's saying about all I can see is the eyes. I just see him. And it's almost like an exorcism. This is almost like she's got to go this far. She's got to exorcise the demons here, get them out. So, you know, being on this planet, going through this, seeing Tyler the way that he is, and having to deal with that, and also as well for Tyler, because it's also as well, it's a complicated story because it's obviously Tyler's having to deal with that. He's hesitant to, like, you know, he realizes when he does start doing that it's actually affecting Burnham, and it's a bit, you know what I mean? So there's that little mix up as well. And there's a nice little touch just slightly earlier than that with Tilly, where Ash seems to show concern, and Tilly kind of gives Michael a look as if to say, you know, he is kind of human, you know. So there's a lot of things in the boiling pot here for Michael and Ash to deal with.
Yeah, definitely, and particularly when Burnham starts telling Tyler the story of her parents. It's the first time we as the audience have heard the full story as well, which is another really interesting moment, and it's a great moment in Burnham's character arc, because what's really interesting is that it's really interesting that she was adopted by Vulcans and learnt to suppress her emotions as a Vulcan does, because she's literally hidden these visceral emotions of her parents' murders for so many years, and they're just starting to kind of resurface now, and she's starting to face them and face the fear of those emotions, which again plays into the theme of fear. And I love when Tyler kind of says, I realise why you hate them, I realise why you hate me, and she just immediately replies, if only it were that easy. And I love that complexity in her emotions at that point, because she's still in love with him, but she hates Klingons, and it's a real complex cauldron of emotions going on.
Yeah, it is, and not to forget as well that during the story that she tells, she says that, you know, there was she made it reminded me of Annika. I don't know why it did that with Seven. I know that there's parents dying in the Borg and all kinds, but you've got the fact that they were staying for 3 more days. They wanted to stay for 3. She wanted to stay for 3 more days, and the Klingons attacked within those 3 days. So the fact that Michael probably blames herself because she was the one that asked them to stay for that as well. So there's so much going on in those brief moments, and we're only talking a 45-minute episode, but there's a lot going on with everything, and I think that's probably the good thing about long form storytelling in this way is that even though we haven't had the backstory of the Klingons, we've known Michael now for 15 episodes or 14 episodes, and there's a lot of stuff that's gone before us that we can relate to, so they don't necessarily need to go over that like you would do if you had like a double parter, because the emotion and the themes, as you said, themes especially, are already there, so they can actually just delve into the nitty gritty of it and hope that the audience can follow along to it. Yeah,
definitely. And I think the whole kind of character arc for Burnham is that she needs to learn what Starfleet is again and learn who she is again, and also to kind of face the fact that she is an emotional human being and that she's got this complexity. And I love Tyler's line, I think it's later on when they're having their final farewell, that he says, even after all you've been through, you still have the capacity to love. And I love that this, through all these 15 episodes, we've come to know Burnham, and she's kind of reaching the goal that the series set out, and it's all kind of being wrapped up quite nicely here.
It is, yeah. Just to change tact very slightly before I go on to my next point, could you imagine being drunk and pissing in the street, like you saw when we did get there eventually? Having 2 strings to do with.
I don't remember what that's like anymore.
No, I don't know what it's like to go out full stop. But I'd say that's just me being facetious. But there's also the fact of Ash also during that conversation talks about his albino kind of aspect as well, saying he was born, and the fact that he's had his own struggle as well. The fact that they really cast them as outcasts as well, which is interesting in itself, because that's something that's really heavily dealt with early on, like literally in the first couple of episodes, and it's not really touched upon during Voq's journey until now, really, isn't it? It's the fact that he also comes up with, the fact that the struggles that he's had when he was fully Klingon. Yeah, it's interesting that, again, it's a cyclical moment, isn't it? That he was an outcast when he was Voq, and now as he is half human and half Klingon, he's an outcast from both of those species. And it really informs everything that happens towards the end of the episode. What about the Shrine of Malor? When we do get there, the fact that they've been hoodwinked, that Giorgio, I think we need to actually talk about Giorgio before we get there. That when we're in the Orion thing, we see like elements of what she enjoys, and the fact that when Tilly goes, no, I'm fine, and it's not for you, which was a great touch. There's some great Tilly moments in this episode. Yeah, it was. There's loads of them. And you mentioned the guest star as well, and I recognise him. What was he from? The Orion that drugs Tilly. Now Clint Howard, he's popped up in quite a few of the Star Trek franchises, and he's Ron Howard, the director's brother. So he always cameos in any Ron Howard film. But Clint Howard also had a small part in Fringe, and I believe that me and you did the podcast on the episode where he basically plays this conspiracy freak who's also a Star Trek fan, and drops lots of Star Trek kind of references. Yeah. So again, it's cyclical. It was one of those things where, I mean, it was one of those things where you just like look at someone and go, right, I know exactly who he is. Why on earth am I having a blank on him? And I didn't have a look. To see what he'd been in, what he was doing. But now you said Clint Howard, it was like, of course he's bloody Thing's brother, isn't he? So that's nice, and he's been in millions of stuff. But as you say, things other Star Trek ones and all kinds. Right? Okay, yeah, and of course, Happy Days, of course.
Yes, of course.
But which is probably the main thing I recognise him from. But so the fact that she realised that she was drugs. This goes back to what we were saying before about the fact that was she manipulated, and Tilly's quick to realise that she's been duped there, because she's like, oh, hang on, and opens the thing and the drones aren't there. So what do you make to this genocidal kind of mission then? Because I know we've talked about the Starfleet thing of it, but what do you actually think to the idea of what, especially the fact that we've got mirror universe kind of annotations with the fact that, when they did this, they had, Terran Empire ships picking them all off at once. And even the fact that Giorgio says, well, the Klingon race is still going to survive. It will just be obliterated and they'll be scattered around the galaxy kind of thing. What did you make to that, the plan and the links to the mirror universe and how Giorgio did it the first time round?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really shows the real low, desperate point that Starfleet are to actually allow this to happen. I mean, they're literally allowing the genocide of an entire species. Yes, they're at war with them, and it also just shows the complete difference between the two universes and how the people think and their morals and their values and Giorgio is, Mary Giorgio is she's literally talking about it like she's talking about having a sandwich. It's just there's no kind of remorse or anything in her voice and tone of her voice. She's talking about it like it's normal, like it's an everyday occurrence, and that's quite shocking in the fact that she can talk like that. And in this universe, it's unspeakable, it's unheard of, and yet Starfleet are allowing this to happen because they have been pushed to the brink, they've been pushed to the limit, and they're about to basically face extermination. So what else can they do? But it's where Burnham excels and where she finds a different way, and it's that whole kind of Star Trek Starfleet kind of code of honor that you can solve these things through means other than violence.
With regards to that, the fact that Giorgio is the way she is, but the thing about the self-preservation was that she survives this purely because, and you mentioned about big space battles and things like this, and this is the thematic space battle in some ways, that you've got the fact that Michael has to think of another way. And it plays to Giorgio's ego to actually get to stand down, because in any other, any other show, whether it to be today, whether it be in the 90s or 80s, you'd have the big bad. No, I'm going to go down with it. I'm the evil guy. I'm going to blow up, and I'm going to take it with me, or I'm going to drop something down there. You're going to kill me, and then you've got to somehow save the universe. And it doesn't do that. It just the way that she talks, Michael talks her down, and gets her to live another day. And the fact that they'll be seeing her again sometime, because so many stories would go down that route, the route of kill the character and deal with the aftermath and try and save the world and take it from there. So what do you? It's a really interesting take on that, just from that point before we even get to Lorel.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, on. It's like two or three reasons why that's interesting, because one, I don't think Burnham wants her to die, and I don't think she wants to be forced to kill her, because even though she's kind of realising that this person is so far removed from Prime Giorgio that she'll never get her back, but in a way she wants her to live. And I love that kind of, Giorgio, be good. That little comment there as she walks away, I just think is absolutely perfect. And even then, she has hope that this Mirror Giorgio might morally turn around or get better in some way. And I like that kind of inkling of hope. And like you mentioned earlier on, it's nice that this is not kind of tied up with a bow tie. It's left open, and of course we know it's what happens in season 2, but that's a nice plot element that is left open and it is left to interpretation.
Yeah, no, it is good, and I think it's, as I say, it's just the expectation of the show to go down a Hollywood route, and it doesn't take it, and it goes down a Starfleet route is really, really nice. And then obviously, finally, L'Rell. We've got the fact that we're bringing L'Rell in. L'Rell expects something completely different, and Michael, as I say, this is the kind of where will you take my hand kind of thing comes in, doesn't it? Because Michael is center stage. She's like, she's pulling things out of the bag that no one would have expected. And the fact that she's got the print for L'Rell. L'Rell has the power now. The fact that she knows Klingons that well now that we can, it's all about having the power and the reunification thing of L'Rell, knowing that the psychological aspect behind her means that she wants more than anything is the reunification. And this is a way of giving it to her. And also Ash, the fact that Ash gets involved at this point as well is it's really good writing here. I do like the fact that they've brought that story element in, and again, using L'Rell's story to actually give you some credence on it, because it's not a case of she was the big bad and she's been redeemed. This was, well, she is still the big bad, but she's got a way of actually reuniting the Empire. That's all she wants. She doesn't want to, she wants to remain Klingon. She's, there's that right-wing aspect to it. But at the same time, they don't want to lose what they are. And that's what Starfleet was saying. So obviously, we come in peace was that big war cry. But here, it's Michael saying, we come in peace. This is the way you reunite, the 24 houses. Yeah,
there's several things here for me. I mean, I like the way that the bomb device is used as a symbol of power to reunite the Klingon Empire and put an end to a war. And it's a great plot device and works very well that way. And the writing in the Shrine is very nice and nuanced. I do think the scene where she's talking to all the houses is a little bit neat and wrapped up.
Yeah.
A bit too much for me, but then knowing what we get in season 2 and the power struggle she's getting makes it more believable and makes it more complex. But at that point, just that scene was a little bit too neat.
Yeah.
But I also like the fact that, again, we get a little bit of where Tyler's going to go and that he's going to go and leave with L'Rell.
Yeah. No, that is good, and I think you're right with the when she goes to the ship and speaks to the Klingons. There's a scene right in there where there's 4 Klingons just looking at her, and it's like, I don't like that look. I don't like the way that looks at all. But I do like the fact that they start laughing at her, and it's like, who does she think she is? And the way that Ash actually says you need to come out of the light now, and that is effectively, isn't it? Because they're coming out and they're like, who does she think she is? Kind of, it's that kind of attitude to her, and the fact that she then all of a sudden has the power. It's like, oh crap, you know what I mean? So I do like the concept, but as you say, it is a bit like, all right, well the war's over, the Klingons are going to reunite, everything's good, let's go, end of season. And where I would have liked maybe, you talk about the Battlestar Galactica, the suicide bombers and stuff like that. You'd maybe have had, more of a, maybe season 2 is a bit more of that, but, more of the fact that, it isn't as simple of bringing the 24 houses together. There will be still fractions and stuff like that within it. And I just think for leaving that story almost like wrapped up so they can move on, because that was one of the things that people were suggesting that, is that the Klingon War done then? Are we going to move on to something else? And, it isn't quite that next season, but, it could have easily gone down that route. But yeah, that's it. That's interesting itself. And then we get to the final scene, and I won't lie, that I was watching this for the first time in as many years, like 2 years or something, and I did get a bit like, Enterprise is coming, and I wasn't expecting that, because I've said on the podcast. Oops, sorry, I'm knocking my microphone all over the place. I've always said that I'm not. I'm a huge original series fan. I'm still going through the first run of the original series, and Next Generation, and I know you're a Next Generation fanboy as well, is my thing. But just the very nature of Enterprise being the flagship, and it is such a big ship, and don't get me wrong, like I love the original series films, but just seeing that NCC and then the 1 and the 7 come on, And it's like, I just got really, really excited, and it took me by surprise when I saw it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, the first time I saw it, I was like, this is amazing, this is brilliant. And the fact that they say Captain Pike, then, you know, if you're a Star Trek fan, you know instantly, okay, we're going to the first crew, which means Spock might be on there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it jumps, because the way it works, it kind of jumps from NCC. So as soon as anyone sees NC, they're like, that's the Enterprise. You know, because it's like, there's no way that's not. Then you get to the 1-7, you're like, okay, yeah, the Enterprise is coming. And it's, for anyone who hasn't quite noticed that, it's then Captain Pike. So you're getting all these things sprinkled through, and you just like, it's just a build-up. You know, because people who might not necessarily know the registration, who might be a passing Star Trek fan, you know, pretty much every Star Trek fan will know it. But if someone's just watching the show, they will go, well, what's that? And then it's Captain Pike. Then, you know, the fact that you get Michael saying it's USS Enterprise, and, you know, you've got Sarek on there as well, is, you know, it is indicating Spock's either on there. Because I remember, obviously, at the time, there was a big question of, is Spock on there? Is Spock missing? Are we going to see Spock? You know, it was all those questions, wasn't it, about, you know, about that fact? But it was a nice thing to see it, and I still to this day love that the fact that the ship comes in, but the two ships together. I think that's a wonderful image, that of Discovery and Enterprise together.
Definitely, it's brilliant. And I think with you know, that kind of following the big speech that she has at Starfleet as well. Which really reminds me of, like, you know, the Undiscovered Country, when you have that big speech by Kirk, and then they all turn around and everyone's applauding, and it's kind of mirrored here with Burnham then turning around, and that big huge smile on her face is this full circle, this kind of character arc has come to a completion, and that big smile on her face is an admission that she is an emotional being. And that she is capable of love and compassion, and I like the fact that has come, that kind of character arc has come to a close here.
Yeah, and the fact that we've got it's interesting how they don't use San Francisco; it's in Paris, and you've got Amanda obviously and Sarek, and I like the fact that Sarek even admits, you know, he got wound up in the whole genocide thing as well, and he's openly admits that to her and calls her daughter, and, you know, that as an emotional arc for it, that's a nice tie up. That's a nice emotional tie up that, you know, you do have Amanda coming to her, the episodes that we've had in the past, and then obviously Sarek's obviously there for reasons, just purely for that end scene with the Enterprise. But it is nice that, you know, we get a bit of time at that point. Yeah,
I like the wrap up with the Burnham and Sarek arc. You know, he is incredibly proud of what she's done, and having that from her father is what she's kind of seeked, or, you know, throughout all the series, and that she's wanted to impress him and make him proud, and, you know, she has done that. And of course, you know, he gets to present her with her reinstatement and putting her Delta back on. It's just a great cyclical arc that you know, way back when she had the Delta on her chest in the first two episodes, and that's what she's kind of been clawing her way back to, and she's now got it, which is it's a great kind of wrap up.
So yeah, and that brings the episode to a close. So is there anything that I've missed that you have noted down that you want to bring up before we say our farewell to the world of Star Trek Discovery?
The only other thing I wanted to touch upon, again, it's another kind of thread that gets wrapped up nicely, which is the last scene with Burnham and Tyler. And as we mentioned, you know, she sees his eyes now and not Vox. And it's a great way of showing that she has accepted what has happened and is ready to move on and accept Tyler for who he is. And I love that he gives her the knot. So he's basically giving her a tether, maybe between them, which is nice. Yeah. I just like that kind of... It's almost, that's more open-ended than the finality of the scene that they had in the previous episode.
Yeah, it's kind of like an acceptance, isn't it? And as well, what I quite like about it isn't like a happy ever after, let's come and work on our ship kind of thing. It's the fact, you know, we've both needed each other. We've needed that tether. We're still there for each other. But, you know, we're going to need to go our separate ways because that's what the story demands. You know, and it's not like, you know, it's not going to be a case of, oh, look, they've got together and it's going to be happy ever after. We need to keep them apart, and you might be able to write further stories about them, which we know we'd get. But the fact that, you open this whole new story arc of, where's Tyler going? What's he doing? How's Michael going to react to that? It gives you that part of, as you say, open-endedness of, where's that going to go? Because I do remember wondering where's that going to go in the grand scheme of things. So it's nice that they don't give it, they give it a conclusion, but they don't give it a happily ever after conclusion, which I don't think you could do because obviously they were hoping for a second season anyway. Yeah, so that unless you've got anything else, that wraps us up for the for our voyage into Star Trek Discovery, and we'll be back in the new year. So anything else you want to bring up? No, I
don't think so. It's been really good fun jumping on the back end of this season with you.
Yeah, it's been great to have you.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been great to have you, and also the fact that moving forward, I think we might need to talk about. I think we talked about this in the update episode, but as I say, next week we're all looking forward to seeing season 3 of Star Trek Discovery and see where that takes us. So We Are Starfleet will be the place to go on the We Made This podcast network to see what happens in that, and I'm really looking forward to that. So during that period, during those episodes, we're going to take a break. And I know, Luke, you've only just got your wheels off, and so, but we'll be back. We're going to be talking some specials in the new year. We're going to look at things like the Borg. We might touch upon other things, and of course, if anything Star Trek Picard kind of jumps out at us that we need to cover, we'll jump on the mic and talk about it. I'm assuming that Make It So, the way that we're going to move as previous, is that both Luke and I will host ones. We'll get various different guests on, people you'd have heard before on the podcast, things like people like Craig McKenzie, who's obviously been doing Really Going with you, Luke. So we'll get loads of different voices on for when Star Trek Picard eventually comes to air, which being in the middle of a pandemic, we have no idea when that's going to be, but we'll play it by ear. And and then that's it basically. So we'll see all that there. We'll, as I say, we'll be tweeting out what the plans are. As I say, once Discovery's finished, then you'll get a special from us, and then we'll take it from there. Probably have one a month for a few months, and we'll take it from there. But Luke, just in the meantime, you've obviously got podcasts on the go. I've got podcasts on the go. Where can people find you? You've mentioned a few shows, and we've mentioned a few shows over the course of this episode. And one is particularly Fringe. So, and I know you're covering Fringe at the moment, and where else can people find you online and what you're up to?
Yes, as we mentioned, you can find me on a podcast called Observing the Pattern. We're at the halfway mark of the TV series Fringe season 2.
I think I'm coming on soon. I think I'll be appearing in the next couple of episodes. I think
you've got Jahari Window coming up. I think next week. Yeah. So that's where this really kicks in for season 2 from there on, which is good. And then I've got one last episode of Lower Decks to do, which is for the episode 10, the final episode, and I'll be there with Craig McKenzie. You can find that on the Make It So Twitter handle, which is Jean-Luc Podard, I believe. And you can find me personally on Twitter as well at Luke_Winch.
Excellent. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. It's RMULDRAKE. We're starting to record some of the season 6 of the X-Files at the moment. I've got a podcast recording on Saturday, as it happened, for the beginning. So that'll be being released just not too far away now. And in a couple of weeks after this airs as well, the Millennium season 3 coverage of The Time Is Now, which is the podcast I show run, we'll be starting the first episode of season 3 of Millennium. You can find me at The Time Is Now pod. And then on top of that, you'll also see our second season coverage of Red Dwarf, and that's on Shipwrecked and Comatose, and you can find that at Red Dwarf pod. And I'm still shocked that we've managed to get at Red Dwarf pod as a Twitter handle. I was quite surprised by that. So it's all good. So that's it. So for the final time, unless something magic happens, and in Star Trek Picard we've got a spore drive. Can you? I think we need to spore out of here. Maybe which planet would you like to go into the inner workings of? Jump into a volcano or something. Oh yeah, maybe maybe some kind of hugely volcanic planet, or we could just have a rest at Riser. Well, let's go to Riser. That's not. Hey, that Riser's a very good idea, actually. Yeah, let's do Riser. Let's spore jump to Riser. So yep. So get the particles ready. Yep. Black alert, and engage.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Cine Mortuary podcast.
Right, Rob, just to laser align and realign the topic of discussion.
Yes.
Would you like to take a dive straight in to the X-Files movie for me, please?
Yes, I would. We open on Gillian Anderson in her lingerie. No, sorry, that's the fan fiction one, isn't it, that people keep talking about?
That you wrote, yeah.
I did not write, and I will sue you, sir. Right, yes, Sounds of the Lambs. Directed by Jonathan Demme, 1991.
Pretty Fly, a 90s nostalgia podcast.
I think it says a lot about our humanity if we go down that road with Hannibal Lecter, and if we kind of, like right at the end of Silence of the Lambs, he's going to have an old friend for dinner. And... which is a great line, by the way.
Tremendous line.
It's a movie full of great lines.
Have an old friend for dinner.
But you're kind of happy for him, aren't you? Like I am.
A little bit. I think it's important to remember that even someone who's a psychopath who doesn't have, or a character that's a psychopath that doesn't have that normal range of human emotions, they are human.
Observing the Pattern, a Fringe podcast.
Why is Nina so invested in getting Tyler back? Because, she even offers to put up the money. Massive Dynamics will cover the ransom. So, she's heavily invested. And then, him basically saying, yeah, I took work home with me. And so it kind of, something doesn't add up in that area.
Nina's a very intriguing character because... at least up until this point, and probably well into season 2, you are never sure of her allegiances.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. Make It So, a Star Trek Universe podcast, was created and is produced and hosted by Tony Black and Kurt North. You can find the show on Twitter at Jean-Luc Podard and on Facebook in the Make It So, a Star Trek podcast fan group discussion group. Check out the We Made This network at We Made This Pod on Twitter and on Facebook by typing in We Made This, and you can find all of our shows on our website, wemadethispod.com. Thanks for listening.